Yeah, changes you expect, right? So an anticipated change is something's going to happen, but there is another key part to this with an anticipated change. So a change that is foreseen, let me give you the textbook definition here. We'll put it right out of here. So you can write this in your notes now. Again, anticipated change. A change that is foreseen by decision makers. In time. Okay, so a change that's foreseen by decision makers. All right, so there's a very important part of this definition I intentionally left off. Because what are you doing when you have enough time and you see that something's going to be different in the future and you anticipate that difference? What do you do today?
Start changing for whatever's going to happen.
Okay, yeah, start adjusting your own behavior, right? That's the key part to this, is that you start making adjustments to adapt to that change that's forthcoming. And again, we kind of brought in the sports-related analogy, right? If you start to be able to telegraph the quarterback on where that ball's going to go, you start positioning your feet a little bit better to maybe make an interception or something, right? So you're changing your behavior based on that thing that you see changing. So a change that is foreseen by decision makers in time to make adjustments in behavior. So behavior like what? Well, if we're in the business world, maybe it's purchases, investments, inventory, etc. All kinds of things that we might adapt to because of what we see coming down the pipeline. Okay, so why is that important? Well, for the economy, if we see things telegraphed, or we know if that's been done, then this is what happens. That's what economists get paid 6 figures for, is to make predictions, right? The models that we're working through are going to make predictions on what do we think of the inflation rate's going to be in 6 months or a year, right? Well, what do we think it's going to be? Well, we use these models. These are kind of the basics, building blocks, to make and anticipate what the economy is going to look like in a year, right? What do some of our conspiracy theorist friends do in preparation, the preppers? How many of you have maybe I won't have you disclose yourself, but how many of you have friends or families that are doomsday preppers? They got some stuff. You got some prepper people out there? What do the prepper people do? Anticipating that doomsday may not be as far off as we think.
Prep?
Yeah, what type of prepping goes on? Those of you who have prepper friends. I have a few prepper friends. Yeah, Tim?
I heard that they build like bunkers.
Okay, yeah, that would be the most extreme, is to start building underground bunkers. There's been a few movies on stuff like that. There was a really multi-million-dollar one over in Missouri that just went on the market for sale. Somebody did an elaborate underground bunker, and it was listed for sale. So apparently doomsday didn't come quick enough. What else do preppers do? How about some minor prepping? What might you do? Yeah?
You have like perishable food.
Yeah, unperishable goods, right? So you get canned goods and MREs. You know, if you read the If you guys know what MREs are, that's what they used in the military for stuff. It's dried food. I bought some for camping and other things. It has like a 50-year expiration, right? So it's like, buy some of these MREs. What are they? They're $10 a package. Well, buy them, throw them into a plastic tub, and if the world starts to go to pieces, you've got some sort of reserves of food, right? Ready to go. What else? Especially in Kansas, what might some of these preppers have? Guns.
Small market.
Big arsenal, right? I know some friends that have a lot of ammo stockpiled. Maybe they have some decent amount of guns too, but they're mostly thinking ammo to defend themselves, right?
Gasoline.
So we've seen lots of movies like this. Yeah, gasoline, fuel, other things. Solar panels. If it is a doomsday scenario, our gas station's going to be open even. Probably not. So maybe we have some solar or some other energy alternatives. So all of those things are being done in anticipation of something. Now, maybe there's not a lot of evidence to be too worried about it, but that's why I brought up the conspiracy theory. But the main thing is we've got businesses and households anticipating a lot of things to come because it might be important whether the economy is going up or down or interest rates are going up or down. On Wall Street, when the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States, makes their announcement about monetary policy, I mean, all the Wall Street gurus are huddled around waiting for that. If that speech starts at noon, they are there, right, listening, waiting for it to come on. As soon as the Federal Reserve chair says something about a policy change, they're making trades, right? Because if all of a sudden they say, well, we're going to pursue expansionary credit opportunities or something like that. We feel like the unemployment reports say this or whatever. So they are making instantaneous changes right after that stuff. And of course, they've already anticipated some of what they think the Fed is going to say, the Fed chair is going to say at that meeting. But then they're all of a sudden in motion and acting. Okay, questions or comments? Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, since, like Prohibition, I wonder how they reacted since the entire industry was just illegal then. You can't really sell those.
So if you knew Prohibition was coming down the pipeline though, right? So it wasn't a total secret like overnight it just changed. What do you start doing? Stockpiling booze and changing your behavior, right? Because of that law change. So all kinds of law change, environmental changes, right? With regulations coming down, you're going to have to do this. Well, all of a sudden businesses start making adjustments now, knowing that that regulation is going to impact them at some point in the future. All right, so the reason this is so important is that we need to take that into account on what people are doing in anticipation of some change coming down the pipeline. The ones that are harder are unanticipated change. So all of a sudden there's a shock to the system. So an unanticipated change is just simply a change that could not be reasonably foreseen. It was just impossible. It's not that you weren't doing your homework. And so when we have an unanticipated change, people are very reactive, right? So reactive behavior. Whereas here, we could think of this being more proactive behavior. So before the fact, so we have more proactive behavior. All right, so I put the plate of spaghetti up here just to, kind of remind us of the complexity of the things in the economy. And this is certainly an oversimplification in many ways. But we have our cigarettes that are driving the economy partitioned into the 4 spending categories: consumption making up about 70% of GDP. So here's Y is our income for the nation. GDP is equal to Y equals C plus I plus G plus X. I being investment, businesses, expanding businesses, buying inventory, machines, equipment, government buying weapons of mass destruction and other government spending, and then net exports, what we're doing with the rest of the world in our trade and what that looks like. All of that then channeling into the resources, the resource owners, the largest of which would be the labor force. So we got wages and we have some after-tax income to spend. And so that is our final goods market and our resource market, kind of the primary driver of the economy. What is economics? Who remembers that one? That could be a good extra credit question for Lawrence.
The study of scarcity.
What is economics? What?
Study of scarcity.
Study of scarcity. That I've heard some people use that definition. Not my favorite. I got kind of my top favorite, which is unlimited wants with limited resources, which scarcity, kind of implies. But I like that definition because it's a little more direct. The economics is the study of trying to satisfy unlimited wants of people over here with limited resources to work with, right? And what does it force? It forces choices. And that's what we mean here, while we're kind of picking on the choices that we make. When we can see things coming down the pipeline, we can change the choices we're making today. If we don't see the changes, then it could cause some other types of problems. All right, so the focus of this chapter, chapter 10, is to look at how the market changes. We're always in a market process. So chapter 10, I'm going to call this kind of the invisible hand response to changes in the economy. So invisible hand is referring back to Adam Smith, and it's this decentralized system of people pursuing their own best interest. And how does that end up creating some order? So it's emergent order, so it's emerging, it kind of comes out all on its own. Emergent order that comes about. Yeah, this is kind of the invisible hand idea here, and just responding to changes in general. Emergent order that comes about from people pursuing their own self-interest. And what Adam Smith said about that is that the public interest ends up getting best served that way. So kind of counterintuitively, Adam Smith says that the public interest is best served with a hands-off approach. So chapter 10 is going to kind of explore the invisible hand part, so that then in chapter 11, which is the next chapter this week, we're going to enter in the government with a little bit more heavier hand or a mixed approach of doing some things with the economy. Okay, so let's start off with some demand. So what we did in chapter 9 is we laid out the basic market here, where we're measuring real GDP. We're going to start to transition you guys to thinking about that being the Y, the income of the nation, or real GDP, and the average level of prices of things. Somewhere along this spectrum, numbers get bigger as we go, and there's a potential for the economy. So we have the long run aggregate supply curve showing the full employment level of output for the economy. So this was our potential level of GDP. If the economy was really operating well and kind of doing its thing, we'd kind of come to some level of real GDP. That level of GDP is independent of the prices. That's why it's vertical. So prices really don't matter in terms of long-term well-being of the nation. The potential for the country is coming through us at the level of resources and technology that we're using. And so we'll get into that with the supply shifters. Then we had a short-run aggregate supply curve that reflected the possibility that resource prices and output prices may not adjust at the same rate. So along the short-run aggregate supply curve, resource prices like wages are fixed. Let's just say $10 an hour just to give us an easy number. So that was kind of the key part to the setup last week. I think I did super key or double key or something, that along this curve, it's upward sloping, similar to chapter 3 with the supply of beer, and that if the resource prices of beer stayed constant, but Anheuser-Busch could sell their beer for a higher price, they'd make more of it, right? If they could get a higher price per case while keeping resource prices fixed, it'd be very profitable for them to increase production. Well, if we have resource prices going up at 4% and we have output prices going up at 4%, Anheuser-Busch is not in any better position to make more beer, right? So if they're equal, if it's a 4% and 4%, then there's no benefit to increasing production. So that gave us these two supply curves, one being the long run curve, one being the short run curve. All right, so that's all review from last week. Any questions now that you guys have done your homework and tests from last week? All right, and then the aggregate demand curve. So the aggregate demand curve is downward sloping, so we're kind of thinking at lower prices. If prices were lower, holding all of the things constant, like our wealth and some other things, then people would want more. All right, so all three lines crossing here gave us a long run equilibrium. And I'll do this quite a bit. Let's just start off at a price level of 100, equal to our base here, just to keep numbers easy. So the economy is currently in a long run equilibrium because we're here at the full employment level of output and some starting price level. All right, so now this chapter starts off. What happens if things change on us? So the key point here is that, so let me put long run equilibrium. all three curves intersect. Intersect. Well, we're likely to not be in a long run equilibrium. So kind of the first key point, it is unlikely the current state of the economy is in a long run equilibrium. We can kind of think about that concept this way by bringing back our business cycle. So if we measure real GDP over time, that was our ups and downs of the economy. I'm just drawing some squiggles that are heading north, or heading up anyway, over time. So over time, we probably hit our general trend. We can now start to think about this trend line here as the full employment level or the potential level for the economy is the red line. And so what we seem to be doing is going kind of around our long run equilibrium through expansion, peak, recession, trough, right? The business cycle. The economy's kind of moving and growing and changing, and it's a process. And so at any given point in time, let's pick somewhere here. You guys can just pick an up one. I'm going to pick this point here. What's going on right here? So in 2016, the actual level of output is the blue line. So the actual level is here, and the red line shows us the potential level. So we have what was called an output gap. So the actual level of the GDP is higher than what we'd expect it to be in the long run. So on this graph, are we to the right or to the left of this? 2016, are we to the right or to the left over here?
Right.
To the right. So this is a higher number. Again, just to make up some numbers here, maybe this is 24 trillion and this is 23 trillion. So these numbers are getting bigger, so the actual level of output is higher than where the current level is. Well, how do we get there? There's only two ways that we could be over here. Well, maybe there's three in the long run, but assuming we're in a short run fluctuation, this is going to stay put. What could get us over to this right side? What could get us over here in the short run? Something's got to move here, right? So here's where we are at right here with all three lines crossing. How can I get to a point where the economy is above potential? It's above potential. What would need to happen graphically? There's only two ways this could happen graphically. What could happen to the aggregate demand curve? Prices, so it goes, Reagan, up or to the right. Visually it does look up or down, but I like to kind of train you guys on left and right because then it's consistent whether we're talking about supply or demand. So a shift to the right puts upward pressure on prices, and we move to the right. What's another way it could happen?
Short run. Oh, so there's the right.
This thing goes to the right, and now we're over in this region somewhere. Okay, so now we got to figure out, well, what makes us do that? What has us move that direction? So let's go ahead and draw an aggregate demand curve that is shifted to the right, AD2. So if the economy was not at this level of demand, but rather at 82, then the actual level of GDP, the short run equilibrium, is here. And prices are above the long run. Again, just to make up a number, let's say they're 103. If it's 103, how much have prices gone up at Walmart? What percent? 3%. That's why we're using these easy numbers, right? Back to our inflation chapter. New number minus the old number divided by the old number. We could do the math, but the reason I picked the base here is that it's easy, right? We can do, it's a 3% increase in prices. But it's only prices at the cash register, not the wages. So all prices have not gone up by 3%. The assumption of the model, this economic model, is the lag time assumption. So for starters, we're going to say that this happens, output prices go up by 3% at the prices at the cash register, but resource prices remain fixed. And that's how we get this expansion. Okay, any questions or comments there? Ooh, it's getting fun. Getting real fun.
Actually, I do have a question.
Okay, go for it.
Does the triangle that this new line make mean anything?
No.
Okay.
The equilibriums mean something. I assume you're talking about like this triangle or something?
Yeah, the one between non.
Right here? Yeah, no, not at this point.
Later, got it.
Okay, so short run equilibrium. Short run equilibrium. The current state of the economy is always given or shown by the intersection of aggregate demand and short run aggregate supply. The current state of the economy, kind of this actual GDP, so this gives us our actual GDP, current state of the economy, and the current price level. So we nail down those two variables. All right, so how do we get that AD curve to shift out to the right? We're going to do aggregate demand shifters. Let's see if I need to place my markers. Finish. All right, so aggregate demand shifters. Number one, an increase in real wealth. So if you feel wealthier, then you want to buy more stuff. Increase in real wealth. So what is the wealth equation? Wealth equals, some of you are in my personal finance class too, wealth. Tim?
The amount that you owe minus the amount that you owe.
You're close, but you said it backwards. Nick? What you own minus what you owe, yes. So the wealth of the nation is adding up everybody's wealth. That was the title of Adam Smith's book, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. So the wealth of any individual is the dollar value of what you own minus the dollar value of what you owe, your debts. So if we're in Professor Wagner's accounting class, which some of you might be, assets minus liabilities, right? Assets minus liabilities is your net worth, or so wealth. Now, we snuck the word real in here. Why did we do that? What does real mean? Nick? Good. Takes into account inflation. So we're thinking about the real number of hamburgers. If I'm a millionaire, right? If I'm a millionaire, that means I have $1 million net worth or wealth. My real wealth takes into account the number of hamburgers I can buy. So if each hamburger is $1 on the dollar menu, that basically doesn't exist anymore, or you get a really mini hamburger, one or the other, my real wealth is 1 million hamburgers. I've got 1 million hamburgers worth of purchasing power, right? Because prices have been taken into account. So why is that important? Well, if we're going to determine whether, if I have $1 million today in net worth, and I have $2 million 10 years from now, am I better off? I'm a 2 millionaire 10 years from now. So today's 2024, April 1st. This is not an April Fool's joke, by the way. So be careful of that. I got reminded of that on the radio station. So if I'm a millionaire today, and by 2034, I've doubled my wealth to 2 million, am I better off? Probably isn't good enough. Am I better? This is econ class. We're just learning about purchasing power and inflation. Tell me how I may not be better off. What does it depend on? Today, I can buy a hamburger for $1, and I have $1 million to my name. I'm a millionaire. 10 years from now, I have $2 million.
How much hamburgers cost?
How much hamburgers cost? If hamburgers are now $3, 10 years from now, am I better off? No, because $2 million doesn't buy the same amount of hamburgers. I should have made it $4. Let's say hamburgers are $4. How many hamburgers can my $2 million buy? Just got their thinking hat on. How many hamburgers can I buy if hamburgers are now $4 10 years from now and I have $2 million? 500,000. So now my net worth is $2 million in nominal terms, in money terms, like we learned last week, but I can only buy 500,000 hamburgers. So am I better off? No, not in terms of the things that make me happy. Hamburgers make me happy. This, you guys got to pierce through the veil of the economy. Believe it or not, this does not make you happy. I know you think it does. I need more money. If I had more money, well, what would you do with more money? I could buy more stuff. Yes, you got it. You can buy more stuff. That's what makes you happy. Money doesn't make you happy, right? So money is a vehicle to get stuff. Money is a vehicle, a means to get you the stuff that you want. It's the stuff that makes you happy. So In economics class especially, we're going to be mindful, since we're thinking about 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, and decisions, we need to take into account the things in real terms. All right, so an increase in real wealth. So if now your house has increased from 150,000 to 200,000 in 1 year, with inflation equal to 2% that year. Are you now more wealthy 1 year from now in terms of house wealth? The house is one of your assets that you own, in addition to maybe some stocks and bonds and cars and other things. But if your housing value went from 150 to 200 in 1 year, did you make some gains in terms of real wealth? What was roughly your percentage increase in your house? 50,000 bucks on 150 starting place. How much is that roughly? 10%, 3%, 30%?
It'd be a third.
A third, yeah, 30%, right? 30% increase, 50,000. So my house went up by 30%. Hamburgers went up from $1 to $1.02. Am I more wealthy now after 1 year? Yes. Right? So the wealth has grown in real terms that year. So increase in house value equal to 50,000 on 150,000 equals 33%, and the price of a hamburger went up from $1 to $1.02. There was definitely an increase in real wealth. I intentionally brought that one up because this was a contributing factor to the financial crisis in 2008. Housing prices were outpacing inflation rates. This was probably a pretty real story, actually. At 2%, the average level of prices was about 2%. This would be a little strong in some markets, 33%, but you had housing price increases that were outpacing these prices with inflation, the average level of prices. And so that put pressure for aggregate demand to shift to the right. So at the very top here now, I want you to kind of complete number one. An increase in real wealth leads to an increase in aggregate demand, a shift to the right. Okay, any questions on that?
Could there be another housing crisis? Because the prices still
course.
seem very outrageous.
Yep. Housing prices are actually on the down a little bit right now. So yeah, there's always room for bubbles when we have things going on, things that we'll talk about over the next week to 2 weeks here. Actually throughout the rest of the semester. All right, so number two, shifter number two. A decrease in the real rate of interest. A decrease in the real rate of interest. There's that real word again. What is the Fisher equation? The real rate of interest is equal to what? This was last week's material. Nominal and actual what? Actual nominal interest rate, and what are we taking into account when we use the word real? Inflation. So it was the stated nominal rate of interest, and then what do we do with the inflation to calculate the real? minus the inflation rate. And then we talked about ex post or ex ante, which is going to bring us into this anticipated inflation if we're looking forward or if we're looking backwards. But the general equation is taking into account that inflation premium. All right, so if interest rates are cheap, are you in for buying a house? Yeah, right? It makes things more attractive. Cars, houses, things that typically people borrow for, even if it's down to flat screen TVs or whatever. So a decrease in the real interest rate leads to an increase in aggregate demand. So cheaper interest rates lead to more borrowing in a variety of ways. For consumers, and maybe I should just put households here instead of consumers. For households, we might especially see an increase in home purchases, homes, cars, expensive other consumer goods. You're not really going to increase your purchases of milk, right? So you typically don't take a loan out for milk, but some of the other things we tend to finance would go up. Businesses, low interest rate environment, there's going to be an increase in machines, equipment, expansion of business. Okay, any questions there? All right, number 3. Optimism about future economy leads to an increase in aggregate demand today. Things have been going good. I think they're going to continue going good, right? Housing prices have been rising. I think they're going to continue to rise. So it's a good time to buy a house. So optimism about a number of things. But for example, we might have your expected future income. I think this is a good one for college students to be thinking. So expected future income. If you expect the economy's going to be doing good, so I'm kind of going a little bit back and forth between micro to kind of get you guys thinking at your level versus the whole economy, but it's kind of similar here. If you guys after college are expecting to make some money, you're going to have some of you are going to have, or most of you are going to have some student loan debt, but not all of you. But you're spending money today because of that, right? So you're increasing your demand for goods and services beyond your income, but not everybody in the whole nation's doing that. But if people in general are optimistic, businesses are thinking, oh man, the sales have been good, the economy's been going good, it looks like we should be profitable at least the next couple of years into the future, so all of those expectations lead to an increase in aggregate demand today. So again, this is really in line with our anticipated changes that we started off with versus unanticipated changes. Number 4, an increase in the expected rate of inflation. So if we expect prices to be going up, this is kind of a sign with some optimism. So an increase in the expected rate of inflation leads to an increase in aggregate demand. Number 5. Higher incomes from foreigners. So an increase in real income of the rest of the world. So the rest of the world has income. I'll put a row on here just to make sure we're not thinking about the United States here with their amount. So if there's increase in foreign income, what happens to the number of exports the United States sells the rest of the world? Do you expect that to go up or down? Up, right? They're going to buy our stuff too. So an increase in foreign income leads to an increase in our exports, which means an increase in our cigarettes net exports, which can be thought of then as contributing to aggregate demand. All right, number 6, last one, depreciation. Depreciation of the row exchange rate. Which from last chapter was our exchange rate E. If the rest of the world's currency is depreciating, what's happening to American money? It's going up, right? So depreciation of the row exchange rate is an appreciation of American dollar, which is an increase in aggregate demand, our purchasing power goes up. All right, we will pick it up there tomorrow.